Silence is deadly. They told you to be quiet. They told you to wait. They told you to stay small, stay polite, stay invisible. And for a long time, you did. You swallowed words that were burning holes in your chest. You buried screams beneath forced smiles. You learned how to nod while your soul was screaming no. They thought your silence meant weakness. They thought your silence meant surrender. But they were wrong, because silence, when forced, is deadly. And today you finally understand who it was killing. You didn't arrive here by accident. You arrived here because something inside you is tired of being muted, tired of being overlooked, tired of being treated like your voice didn't matter. They expected you to break quietly. They expected you to disappear without making noise. They expected you to accept less and call it peace. But look at you, still standing, still breathing, still here. Scarred, yes. Tired, absolutely. But broken? No. They never saw the nights you fought battles in your head. They never heard the conversations you had with the ceiling at 3 a.m. They never felt the weight you carried while pretending everything was fine. They thought silence meant safety. They thought silence meant control. They thought if you stayed quiet long enough, you'd forget who you were. But silence didn't erase you. It sharpened you. There was a moment, maybe you remember it, when the silence stopped being peaceful and started becoming poisonous. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was subtle, a tightness in your chest, a heaviness in your breath, a constant feeling that something inside you was suffocating. You began to realize you weren't protecting yourself by staying quiet. You were slowly disappearing. Every time you didn't speak up, you shrank. Every time you ignored your instincts, you betrayed yourself. Every time you chose comfort over truth, a piece of you went numb, and they benefited from that numbness. They liked you quiet. They liked you unsure. They liked you second-guessing your worth, because silence gave them power. But here's what they didn't understand. Silence also gave you time. Time to observe. Time to endure. Time to grow teeth behind closed lips. You adapted in the dark. You learned how to survive without applause. You learned how to keep going without encouragement. While they were busy underestimating you, you were studying the terrain. You were learning where you were strong and where you needed armor. Pain became your teacher. Loneliness became your training ground. Rejection became your resistance. You didn't just survive the fire. You learned its language. You learned when to stay quiet and when silence was costing you your soul. Because not all silence is wisdom. Some silence is fear wearing a calm face. Some silence is trauma pretending to be maturity. And deep down, you knew it. You felt it every time your heart raced before speaking. Every time your voice shook. Every time you rehearsed your truth but never said it. You weren't weak. You were conditioned to believe that your voice was a problem, conditioned to believe that conflict meant danger, conditioned to believe that being heard would cost you love. So you stayed quiet, and it nearly destroyed you. And then something changed. Maybe it was a betrayal. Maybe it was disrespect one too many times. Maybe it was the moment you realized they would never protect you, only themselves. That's when the silence cracked, not with a scream, not with rage, but with clarity. You saw it clearly for the first time. They were comfortable because you were uncomfortable. They were powerful because you were quiet. They were thriving because you were shrinking. And something inside you said, enough. Enough swallowing, enough shrinking, enough dying quietly. You didn't become loud overnight. You didn't become fearless instantly. You became honest. And honesty is dangerous. When you started changing, they noticed. When you stopped over-explaining, they felt it. When you stopped apologizing for existing, they panicked. Your silence used to serve them. Now it confused them. Because this silence was different. This silence had boundaries. This silence had strength. This silence wasn't fear. It was focus. You no longer argued to be understood. You no longer begged to be chosen. You no longer needed to prove your pain. And that terrified them. Did they really think you'd stay broken forever? Did they really think you wouldn't wake up? Did they really think silence meant submission? No. This was the silence before the storm. You began to speak, but not recklessly. You chose your moments. You chose your battles. You chose yourself. When you spoke, it wasn't desperate, it was deliberate. Your words carried weight because they came from truth. Your presence shifted rooms because it was no longer seeking approval. They started watching you differently, listening more closely, wondering when you became this person. But you know the answer. You were always this person. You were just buried under fear. Silence didn't make you invisible anymore. It made you untouchable. You learned that not everyone deserves access to your voice. Not everyone deserves your explanations. Not everyone deserves your energy. And that is power. Every step forward felt like reclaiming stolen ground. Every boundary felt like breathing again. Every honest word felt like fire leaving your lungs. There were moments of doubt, moments when your old self tried to pull you back, moments when being quiet felt safer. But you remembered the cost. You remembered the nights you cried in silence. You remembered the way your chest felt heavy all the time. You remembered how close you came to losing yourself. And you chose discomfort over destruction. You chose truth over approval. You chose your voice over their comfort. That choice changed everything. Now look at them. They're unsettled. They're unsure. They're trying to understand how the person they controlled with silence no longer flinches. They replay old conversations. They wonder where their power went. They feel the absence of your compliance. And for the first time, they're quiet. Funny how that works. The silence they gave you is now the silence haunting them. You've reached a place they can't touch, not because you're louder, not because you're aggressive, but because you're anchored. You don't need revenge. You don't need validation. You don't need to explain your growth. Your peace is the loudest statement you'll ever make. You walk differently now. You speak when it matters. You stay silent when it doesn't. And that balance, that mastery, that's what makes you unstoppable. Here's the truth they never wanted you to learn. Your voice is not dangerous. Your truth is not a burden. Your boundaries are not cruel. What's deadly is staying silent when your soul is begging to be heard. Silence kills dreams. Silence kills confidence. Silence kills identity. But chosen silence, that's wisdom. That's power. That's control. You know the difference now. So speak when your heart demands it. Stand when fear tells you to sit. Leave when staying means disappearing. You don't owe the world your quiet suffering. You owe yourself your truth, because silence is deadly. But your voice is life, and it's finally yours.